I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who would beg. But there I was, gripping the steering wheel with one hand while the phone pressed against my ear with the other, rain hammering against the windshield so hard I could barely see the taillights ahead of me. Behind me, Maya was whimpering in her car seat, her small body shaking with fever and exhaustion. "Mom, please, I'm begging you." My voice cracked, and I hated myself for it. "The daycare just called. They won't keep her because her fever's too high. I have this event tonight that I absolutely cannot miss. If I don't show up, I'll lose my job." There was a pause on the other end, and I could hear the clinking of glasses, the murmur of other voices. My mother, Carol, was already at some pre-party gathering, no doubt showing off her perfectly coordinated outfit to her equally shallow friends. "Elena." Her voice was ice. "Today is Mark's first major fundraiser. The entire family needs to be there to support him. You can't just constantly derail everyone's plans because of your irresponsibility." Irresponsibility. The word hit me like a slap. I'd been a single mother for 5 years, working 60-hour weeks to keep us afloat after Maya's father walked out when I was 7 months pregnant. I'd never asked my parents for money, never asked them to babysit, except in emergencies. And this was an emergency. "Just a few hours, Mom. I'll pick her up the second I'm done with work." I heard my father's voice in the background, muffled but authoritative. Richard always had to have the final word. Then his voice came through clearly, closer to the phone. "Fine. Bring her here. But make it quick. We need to leave by 6 o'clock. The line went dead. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Relief mixed with something darker, something that tasted like bile in the back of my throat. But I didn't have time to examine that feeling. I merged into the next lane, heading toward my parents' pristine suburban neighborhood. The traffic was brutal. Every light turned red just as I approached. Maya's whimpering grew louder, more desperate. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching her flushed face, the way she kept rubbing her eyes with her small fists. Her temperature had been 103 when I'd picked her up from daycare. The director had looked at me with such judgment, as if I'd knowingly sent a sick child to school. But Maya had been fine that morning. Kids get sick fast. That's what they do. My phone buzzed with a text. I glanced down at a red light. It was from my boss, Vanessa. "Where are you? The Hendersons are asking for you specifically. This is a 6-figure contract, Elena. Don't blow this." The Hendersons. Real estate developers who wanted to throw an elaborate anniversary party for their 20th wedding anniversary. 300 guests, a 5-course dinner, entertainment, the works. If I landed this contract, it would mean a promotion, better pay, maybe even enough to move Maya and me out of our cramped apartment into something with a yard. But first, I had to get through tonight. The corporate mixer I was supposed to be setting up started in less than 2 hours, and I was still 20 minutes from my parents' house, then another 30 back across town to the venue. The drive took 20 minutes. By the time I pulled into their driveway, Maya had fallen into a fitful sleep, her cheeks flushed and damp with sweat. The house looked exactly as it always did, a picture-perfect colonial with manicured hedges and a front door painted a welcoming shade of red. It was all a lie. There was nothing welcoming about this place. I'd grown up in this house. I knew every corner of it, every creaky floorboard, every place where the wallpaper didn't quite match because they'd had to replace a section after Mark threw a baseball through the wall when he was 12. That incident had been laughed off as boys being boys. When I'd accidentally broken a vase at 14, I'd been grounded for a month and made to pay for the replacement out of my babysitting money. My parents were already waiting outside, dressed in their evening best. My mother wore a cream-colored cocktail dress that probably cost more than my rent, and my father was in a navy suit with a red tie, every inch the successful consultant. They looked annoyed, not concerned. Not sympathetic, just annoyed. I unbuckled Maya and lifted her out of the car seat. She was dead weight in my arms, her small body burning up. I grabbed the bag with her medicine, her favorite stuffed rabbit, a change of clothes. The rabbit, Mr. Floppity, had been a gift from my college roommate when Maya was born. It was worn and loved, one ear slightly shorter than the other from where Maya had chewed on it as a baby. "She just needs to lie down on the couch," I said, walking toward them. "Her medicine is in the bag. She needs another dose at 8. It's the pink bottle, 1 teaspoon. I labeled everything. My mother looked at Maya like she was something the cat dragged in. "Don't let her throw up on my Persian rug." Not "poor baby." Not "what can we do to help." Just a warning about the rug. That rug had cost $8,000. I knew because she'd told me at least a dozen times. It was imported, hand-knotted, irreplaceable. Unlike, apparently, her granddaughter's comfort. My father didn't even make eye contact with me. He looked at Maya and said, in a tone he might use with a disobedient dog, "Listen here, young lady. No crying, no fussing. Understood?" Maya stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment. She looked confused, disoriented. "Mommy?" she whispered. "I'm here, baby. You're going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa for just a little bit, okay? Mommy has to work, but I'll be back really soon." "Don't want to," Maya mumbled, her eyes closing again. "Want you." The guilt was a physical pain in my chest. I kissed her forehead, tasting the salt of her sweat. "Mommy loves you so much," I whispered. So much. Then I was back in my car, pulling out of the driveway, watching my parents disappear in the rearview mirror. My mother was already heading back inside, not even waiting to see me off. My father was checking his watch. The drive back across town was a blur. I made it to the venue with 15 minutes to spare. The corporate mixer was for a tech company celebrating their 10th anniversary. 200 employees, an open bar, a DJ, past appetizers. It should have been straightforward, but everything that could go wrong did go wrong. The DJ's equipment shorted out, and we had to scramble to find a backup sound system. The catering company delivered the wrong appetizers, sending shrimp skewers to an event where the CEO was deathly allergic to shellfish. One of the bartenders called in sick at the last minute. I spent 3 hours putting out fires, smiling through gritted teeth, pretending everything was under control while my mind was with Maya the entire time. I checked my phone obsessively. No calls, no texts. I told myself that was good. If something was wrong, they'd call. Right? At 7, I stepped outside for a moment. Just to breathe. The evening air was cool and damp from the rain. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I tried my father. Same thing. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach, but I pushed it down. They were probably at Mark's fundraiser already. Their phones were on silent. That made sense. Everything was fine. At 7:30, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. I nearly dropped my clipboard when I read it. "She's too loud. We put her outside to calm down. Don't bother us anymore." My blood turned to ice. Outside? What did that mean? Outside in the yard? Outside on the porch? My parents' house backed up to a wooded area. Outside where? I called immediately. No answer. I called my father. Straight to voicemail. I called my mother again. Nothing. I texted. "Where is she exactly? Mom, please answer me." No response. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. They wouldn't actually leave her outside in the rain. They wouldn't. But even as I thought it, I knew I was lying to myself. I'd spent my whole life making excuses for them, rationalizing their behavior, telling myself they weren't that bad. But they were that bad. I just never wanted to see it. Panic clawed at my chest. I threw my headset at my assistant, a young woman named Jessica who looked at me with alarm. "I have to go. Family emergency. You're in charge." "But the Hendersons are about to arrive," she said, her voice rising. "Vanessa said you needed to be here to meet them." "I know. I'm sorry. I have to go." My boss, Vanessa, appeared out of nowhere, her face tight with anger. "Elena, you cannot leave right. This is completely unprofessional. The Hendersons specifically requested you. If you walk out that door, there will be consequences." I looked at her. This woman I'd worked for 3 years. This woman who'd praised my dedication and work ethic, and I realized I didn't care. I didn't care about the Henderson contract or my promotion or any of it. "My daughter might be in danger," I said. "I have to go. If you leave, you're fired." "Then I'm fired." I ran. My heels clicked against the marble floor of the lobby as I bolted for the exit. Behind me, I could hear Vanessa shouting something, but I didn't stop. I got to my car and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I broke every speed limit getting to my parents' house. The driveway was empty. The house was dark. No cars. No lights. Nothing. I pounded on the door, screaming their names, screaming for Maya. My voice echoed in the quiet suburban street. A neighbor's dog started barking. I didn't care. I ran around to the back of the house, calling out, my voice raw and desperate. The backyard was empty. The porch was empty. The swing set they'd bought when Mark's kids were young, that they'd never once let Maya play on, stood silent and ghostly in the darkness. Then I heard it. A small, broken sound. Crying. The sound was coming from beyond the back fence, from the alley that ran behind the row of houses. I ran to the gate, yanked it open so hard it bounced against the fence. The alley was narrow, barely wide enough for a garbage truck, lined with dumpsters and recycling bins. And there, in the dim glow of a streetlight, sat my little girl. She was huddled against a dumpster, soaking wet from the rain that had started up again. Her arms were wrapped around her knees, and she was rocking back and forth, that terrible keening cry that children make when they've been crying so long they can barely breathe. Her stuffed rabbit lay in a puddle beside her, filthy and ruined. She was wearing the same clothes I dressed her in that morning, but they were soaked through. Her hair hung in wet strings around her face. "Mommy?" Her voice was so small, so broken. Grandma and Grandpa said I was a bad girl. They said I had to sit here until I learned to be good. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up entirely. I crossed the alley in 3 strides and scooped her up. She was freezing, her whole body shaking with cold and exhaustion and fear. She wrapped her arms around my neck so tightly I could barely breathe, but I didn't care. I held her against my chest, trying to warm her with my own body heat. It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. You're not a bad girl. You're perfect. You're so perfect. She was sobbing into my shoulder, her small body racked with shivers. I grabbed Mr. Floppity from the puddle, and even in the darkness, I could see he was covered in grime. There was a smell coming for an hour? 2 hours? My parents had left for Mark's fundraiser at 6. It was now 8:15. Over 2 hours. They'd left a sick 5-year-old outside alone in the rain for over 2 hours. I carried Maya back to my car, got her buckled into her car seat. She was still crying, great gasping sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her chest. I cranked the heat up as high as it would go and drove straight to the emergency room. The ER waiting room was half full. A man with a bleeding hand, a teenager with a swollen ankle, a woman coughing into a tissue. We waited for 45 minutes before a doctor could see us. Maya had stopped crying by then, but only because she'd exhausted herself. She lay against my chest, occasionally shuddering with leftover sobs. The doctor was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair. She introduced herself as Dr. Patterson. She examined Maya gently, asking questions in a soft voice. "How long was she outside in the rain?" Dr. Patterson asked, not looking at me. "I don't know exactly," I said. My voice sounded strange, too high and thin. "Maybe an hour, maybe longer." "Was she alone?" I hesitated. This was the moment. I could tell the truth. I could explain that my parents had abandoned her. But if I did that, there would be questions, reports, an investigation. Child Protective Services might get involved. They might decide I was an unfit mother for leaving her with people who would do this. Maya could be taken away from me. "She slipped out the back door while I was distracted," I lied. "I found her as quickly as I could." Dr. Patterson looked at me then, really looked at me. I saw the doubt in her eyes. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. Maybe she'd seen enough in her career to know that sometimes the truth causes more harm than good. "She has mild hypothermia, Doctor," Patterson said, "and acute pharyngitis, likely from crying in the cold. I'm going to give her fluids and monitor her for a few hours. She should be fine, but this could have been much worse." The words hit me like a slap. This could have been much worse. My daughter could have died. If the temperature had dropped just a few more degrees. If she'd been out there longer. If someone with bad intentions had found her first. My parents had nearly killed her. Maybe not intentionally, but through their complete lack of empathy, their narcissistic inability to see beyond their own comfort, and I had left her with them. I had known what they were like. I'd known it for years, and I'd still left her there. We got home just after midnight. I tucked Maya into my bed, piling every blanket we owned on top of her. Her hair was still damp, so I got a towel and gently dried it. She watched me with those big eyes, and I could see the questions there. Why did Grandma and Grandpa leave me outside? Why did they say I was bad? "Sweetheart," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I need you to know something very important. You are not a bad girl. You are the best, most wonderful, most precious girl in the entire world. Grandma and Grandpa were wrong. They were very, very wrong." "But I was crying," Maya said in a small voice. "I couldn't stop crying. I tried to be quiet like Grandpa said, but my throat hurt and I missed you." Tears burned in my eyes. "Crying doesn't make you bad, baby. Crying is what you do when you're hurt or scared or sad. It's okay to cry. It's always okay to cry." "Even grown-ups?" she asked. "Even grown-ups?" She thought about this for a moment. "Are you going to cry, Mommy?" "Maybe later," I said. "But right now, I'm going to stay right here with you until you fall asleep." I sat beside her until her breathing evened out and some color returned to her cheeks. Her hand was curled around mine, holding on even in sleep. I watched her for a long time. This little person I'd made, this miracle who'd changed everything about my life. She was the only thing I'd ever done that mattered. And I'd almost lost her because I'd been too weak to cut off my toxic family. That ended tonight. I went to my laptop and opened a new folder. I named it The Reckoning. I started with the text message. I took screenshots, made copies, saved them in 3 different places. Then I went through my email. Years of emails. There was the one from my mother after Maya was born. I suppose congratulations are in order. Though this wasn't exactly the path we'd hoped you'd take. There was the one from Chloe when I'd asked if I could bring Maya to Thanksgiving. "Can you make sure she doesn't get into Mom's china cabinet this year?" We all remember what happened last time. What had happened last time was that Maya, then 3 years old, had accidentally knocked over a teacup. My mother had shrieked at her, called her clumsy and careless. Maya had cried for an hour. I found text message threads full of passive-aggressive comments. Birthday cards they'd sent with just their signatures, no personal message, no love. Christmas gifts that were always slightly wrong, as if they'd bought them for some generic child and not their specific granddaughter. The year they'd given her a pink doll when she was obsessed with dinosaurs. The birthday when they'd given her clothes 2 sizes too small, as if they couldn't be bothered to remember how old she was. I documented everything. Every slight, every insult, every time they'd made me feel small or worthless or like a burden. Every time they'd canceled plans at the last minute. Every time they'd compared me unfavorably to Mark and Chloe. Every time they'd made it clear that I was the disappointment, the one who'd gotten pregnant out of wedlock, the one who'd chosen a mediocre career instead of something impressive. By 3 a.m, I had a file full of evidence, but evidence wasn't enough. I needed a plan. I made co. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. Maya was sleeping peacefully now, her fever broken, her breathing steady. But I couldn't get the image out of my head. Her small body curled up against that dumpster. The way she'd looked at me, confused and betrayed, as if she couldn't understand why the people who were supposed to love her had left her in such a terrible place. I thought about calling the police, filing a report for child endangerment. But that would mean investigations, court proceedings, maybe even criminal charges. And my parents had money, they had lawyers. They'd spin it somehow, make it my fault for leaving Maya with them in the first place, and Maya would have to testify, would have to relive the trauma. No. This had to be personal. This had to hit them where they actually cared, not with their granddaughter, because clearly she didn't matter to them, with their reputation, with their image. With the carefully constructed facade they showed the world, and I knew exactly how to do it. I called in sick the next morning. I didn't technically have a job to call in sick to, since Vanessa had fired me, but I called anyway and left a message. Jessica answered and told me, very apologetically, that Vanessa had indeed terminated my employment, and I needed to return my company equipment by the end of the week. "I'm so sorry, Elena," Jessica said. "Everyone knows you're the best at what you do. This is really unfair." "Thanks," I said. "Take care of yourself, Jess." After I hung up, I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to panic about money, about how I'd pay rent, about Maya's medical bills from last night. Then I compartmentalized it. I'd deal with those problems later. Right now, I had more important work to do. I spent the morning researching my options. I looked into legal remedies. But as I'd suspected, the bar for child endangerment charges was high, and my parents would claim it was all a misunderstanding. I looked into restraining orders, but those required proof of ongoing threat. What I needed was public accountability. I needed everyone who knew my parents, everyone who admired them, everyone who thought they were such upstanding citizens, to see the truth. And then I remembered the gala. Chloe had mentioned it weeks ago in one of her condescending phone calls. Mark's big fundraiser gala at the Astoria Hotel, the crown jewel of his campaign. 300 guests, all the movers and shakers in Charlotte society. Local news coverage. The whole family would be there, presenting a united front, showing everyone what good American values looked like. I knew the Astoria. I'd worked there dozens of times. I knew the layout, the staff, the tech setup. I knew that the AV booth was at the back of the ballroom, accessible through a service hallway. I knew that the events coordinator was a woman named Diane, who I'd helped out of a jam 2 years ago when her sound system had failed 15 minutes before a wedding ceremony. I called Ben. Ben was one of the few people from work who'd become an actual friend. He was an audiovisual technician, the best in the business. He could make any tech setup work, could troubleshoot any problem. More importantly, he was a good person. He'd listened to me vent about my family more times than I could count. "Hey, Elena," he said when he answered. "I heard about what happened last night. Are you okay?" "Not really," I said. "Ben, I need a favor. A big one. And I can't really explain why right now." There was a pause. "This is about your family, isn't it?" "Yeah." "What do you need?" I told him. Not everything. Not about Maya and the dumpster and the hypothermia. Just that I needed access to the AV system at Mark's gala, and I needed him to help me run a custom video. "Elena," he said slowly, "this sounds like something that could get us both in a lot of trouble." "I know, and if you say no, I completely understand. But Ben, they hurt someone I love. They hurt her badly, and they're going to get away with it unless I do something." Another pause. Then, "What time do you need me there?" 2 days later, Chloe called. I'd been expecting it, but my heart still started racing when I saw her name on my phone. "Elena, Mark's gala is this Saturday at the Astoria," she said without preamble. "Mom and Dad say you need to be there. We're doing a family photo, and everyone needs to present a united front." My first instinct was to tell her exactly where she could shove her united front, but I bit my tongue. "Okay, I'll be there." There was a moment of surprised silence. "Really? I thought I'd have to argue with you." "Nope, what time?" 6 o'clock. Cocktails start at 6:30, dinner at 7, speeches at 8. And Elena, wear something nice, okay? Not like that outfit you wore to Mark's birthday last year. The outfit she was referring to had been a perfectly respectable dress from Target. But to Chloe, anything that didn't cost at least $500 was embarrassing. "Sure thing, Chloe." After I hung up, I allowed myself a small smile. The first genuine smile I'd managed since finding Maya in that alley. The next few days passed in a blur. I took Maya to a follow-up appointment with Dr. Patterson, who confirmed she was recovering well but asked, again, about the circumstances of her being outside. I stuck to my story. I hated lying, but I couldn't risk the truth. Not yet. I worked on the video. I compiled everything I had. The text message from my mother, the recording I'd made of that final phone call, where my father had told Maya to sit quietly in the alley. I'd started recording all phone calls with my parents months ago, after one particularly nasty argument where they'd later claimed I'd said things I hadn't. And then there was the photograph, the one I'd taken. I made my way through the growing crowd, smiling and nodding at people I recognized from other events. I spotted Diane, the events coordinator, and we chatted for a few minutes about industry gossip. She didn't seem to find it strange that I was there. After all, I'd worked enough events at the Astoria that my presence wasn't unusual. My family arrived at 6:15, making an entrance. Mark looked polished in his navy suit, every inch the aspiring city councilman. Chloe was stunning in a designer gown, her hair and makeup perfect. My parents flanked them like proud generals, my father in his best tuxedo, my mother in a champagne-colored dress that probably cost as much as my car payment. They moved through the crowd like celebrities, shaking hands, posing for photos. The local news crew was there, filming B-roll for their evening broadcast. A reporter I recognized from Channel 7 was interviewing Mark about his platform, his vision for the city's future. I stayed at the back of the room, watching. Chloe spotted me at one point and waved, gesturing for me to come over. I pretended not to see. My mother glanced in my direction once, her eyes cold and assessing, then looked away as if I didn't matter. Good. The less attention they paid to me, the better. Cocktail hour passed. Dinner was served. I didn't eat. My stomach was twisted in knots, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I kept glancing at the clock, watching the minutes tick by. 8 o'clock. That was when the speeches would start. That was when the video tribute to Mark would play. Or rather, when everyone thought it would play. At 7:45, I made my way to the back of the ballroom. The service hallway was quiet, empty except for a few catering staff shuttling between the kitchen and the main room. I slipped into the AV booth where Ben was waiting. "You ready?" he asked, as I'll ever be. He'd already queued up the video. The original tribute to Mark was still in the system, but Ben had edited the playlist. The fake tribute would play first. Then, after it was done, the original would automatically resume, as if nothing had happened. By the time anyone figured out how to stop it, it would be too late. "I'll be right here the whole time," Ben said. "If anyone tries to stop it early, I'll tell them the system's glitching and I'm working on it." "Thank you," I said. "Seriously, Ben, thank you." He squeezed my shoulder. Nobody should get away with hurting a kid like that. At exactly 8 o'clock, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The crowd quieted. The MC, a local news anchor named Patricia Holloway, stepped up to the microphone with a practiced smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special tribute tonight. Please direct your attention to the screen for a look at the man behind the vision, our guest of honor, Mark Richardson, and the family values that shaped him." The screen behind her flickered to life. Music swelled, something orchestral and uplifting. Images appeared of Mark as a child, playing Little League, graduating from high school, volunteering at various charitable organizations. My parents appeared in several shots, smiling proudly. There was even one of me and Mark and Chloe as kids, all three of us in matching 4th of July outfits, holding sparklers. I'd forgotten about that day. Mark had been 10, Chloe 8, and I was 6. Mark had grabbed my sparkler out of my hand and waved it in my face until I cried. My mother had scolded me for being too sensitive. The video continued for 30 seconds. Wholesome. Perfect. Exactly what you'd expect from a political campaign. Then the screen went black. Static filled the speakers. The crowd murmured, confused. Someone called out asking if everything was okay. Then 3 words appeared on the screen, white text on black background. Family, honor, truth. The text faded. My mother's text message appeared, blown up to 15 feet tall, each word clear and damning. "She's too loud. We put her outside to calm down. Don't bother us anymore." The crowd's murmuring grew louder. I could see heads turning. People looking at each other in confusion. On stage, Mark had frozen. His champagne glass halfway to his lips. Chloe's smile had turned brittle. Then the audio kicked in. My father's voice, amplified through the ballroom's state-of-the-art sound system, clear and cold and absolutely unmistakable. "Sit there and be quiet. When you learn how to behave, we'll come back for you." The murmuring stopped. The ballroom had gone completely silent, and then the photograph appeared. Maya, my beautiful, precious girl. Sitting on wet pavement in the dark, pressed against a dumpster, her face a mask of fear and confusion. Her clothes soaked through, her rabbit filthy and ruined. Her eyes red from crying. The image held on the screen for 15 agonizing seconds. Someone gasped. I heard a woman say, "Oh my God." A man's voice? Is that a child? Another voice. She's sitting by a goddamn dumpster. The image faded to black. Then white text appeared again. Ask the Richardson family about their values. The screen went dark. The lights came back up. For a moment, nobody moved. 300 people sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they'd just seen. Then, the ballroom exploded. People were talking all at once, voices rising in shock and outrage. Phones came out of pockets and purses, fingers flying over screens. I could see the tweets starting already. Someone was live streaming. The news camera that had been filming for B-roll was now pointed directly at my family's table. On stage, Patricia Holloway looked like a deer in headlights. She was saying something into the microphone, trying to regain control, but nobody was listening. At the head table, my family had become a tableau of horror. My mother looked like she might faint, all the color drained from her perfectly made-up face. And my father. My father stood up so abruptly his chair fell backward with a crash. He pointed at the screen, now blank and innocent, his hand shaking with rage. "This is a lie!" His voice boomed across the ballroom. "This is slander! Someone is trying to sabotage my son's campaign." But it was too late. The damage was done. The image of that abandoned child had already burned itself into the minds of everyone present. I could see it in their faces. The horror, the disgust. The way they were all looking at my family now, not with admiration, but with revulsion. A reporter from Channel 7 pushed through the crowd toward the head table, microphone in hand, cameraman in tow. "Mr. Richardson, can you comment on the allegations? Is that your granddaughter in that photograph?" My father's face turned red. "No comment. This event is over. Everyone needs to leave." But nobody was leaving. More reporters were closing in now, sensing blood in the water. I could see Mark's campaign manager, a slick man named Trevor, frantically typing on his phone, probably trying to do damage control. But what could he possibly say? The evidence was undeniable. Chloe had started crying, mascara running down her cheeks. "This is a setup," she was saying to anyone who would listen. "Someone doctored that photo. That's not real." But I could see that nobody believed her. The text message was real. The voice recording was real. And the photograph? God, the photograph was so obviously real that no amount of denial could erase it. I stayed in the AV booth, watching it all unfold below me. Ben was beside me, equally transfixed. "Holy shit," he breathed. "I knew it would be bad, but this is... Yeah," I said softly. My mother was the first to see me. Her eyes swept the ballroom, wild and desperate, and somehow locked onto the AV booth, onto me. Standing there in the window, watching them. Our eyes met across the distance, and I saw the exact moment she realized what I'd done. Her mouth formed my name, though I couldn't hear it from this distance. She started toward the back of the ballroom, pushing through the crowd. My father saw where she was going and followed. "Time to go," I said to Ben. We slipped out through the service door, into the hallway that led to the kitchen and then to the loading dock. Behind us, I could hear shouting. My mother's voice, shrill and furious. "Elena! Elena! Get back here!" But we were already gone, out into the cool night air, into Ben's car parked in the service area. He drove me to where I'd left my car 3 blocks away, in a public parking garage. "You okay?" he asked as I got out. "I will be," I said. "Thanks for everything, Ben. I owe you." "You don't owe me anything. Just take care of yourself and that little girl." I drove home, my hands steady on the wheel. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt numb, empty, like I'd used up every emotion I had and there was nothing left. Mrs. Chen was waiting up when I got there, even though it was nearly 10 o'clock. Maya was asleep on her couch, covered with a handmade quilt. She looked peaceful, her cheeks pink and healthy, her breathing deep and even. "How did it go, Mrs.?" Chen asked quietly. "It's done," I said. "It's finally done." She nodded, asking no further questions. She helped me carry Maya to my car, and we drove the short distance back to our apartment. I carried my daughter inside, tucked her into bed, and sat beside her in the darkness, listening to her breathe. My phone had been buzzing constantly for the last hour. Texts, calls, voicemails. I'd turned the sound off, but I could see the notifications piling up. I finally looked at them. 17 missed calls from my mother, 8 from my father, 12 from Chloe. 6 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably reporters, and dozens of texts ranging from angry to pleading to threatening. From my mother, "How could you do this to us? How could you be so cruel? We're your family." From my father, "You will regret this. You've destroyed everything we built. This is unforgivable." From Chloe, "You selfish bitch. You've ruined Mark's career. You've ruined our lives. I hope you're happy." I deleted them all without responding. Then I blocked their numbers. All of them. I was done. The next morning, I woke up to find the story had exploded. It was everywhere. Local news, social media, even some national outlets had picked it up. "Dumpstergate," they were calling it. City council candidate's family embroiled in child abandonment scandal. The photograph of Maya was everywhere, though most outlets had blurred her face to protect her identity. But the image was still unmistakable. A small child, abandoned in an alley in the rain. The text message and audio recording were being analyzed and dissected. Experts confirmed they were genuine, unedited. Mark's campaign issued a statement calling it a malicious attack and claiming the evidence was taken out of context, but nobody was buying it. By noon, 3 of his major donors had pulled their support. By 2 o'clock, the Charlotte Observer had published an editorial calling for him to withdraw from the race. By Sunday evening, he did. The fallout continued for weeks. My parents became pariahs. Their country club asked them to surrender their membership. My father lost 2 major consulting contracts when his clients decided they didn't want to be associated with his brand. The carefully constructed image they'd spent decades building had shattered like glass. Neighbors started avoiding them. Their friends stopped calling. The invitations to charity events and dinner parties dried up. In a city like Charlotte, where reputation was everything, the stress and shame had exposed all the cracks that were already there. Chloe moved back in with our parents, which I imagined was its own special kind of hell. Mark left Charlotte entirely, relocating to Atlanta to try to rebuild his career somewhere his name didn't immediately conjure images of child neglect. As for me, the days after the gala were strangely quiet. I'd expected my family to show up at my door, to confront me, to demand explanations. But they didn't come. Maybe they were too ashamed. Maybe they finally understood that they'd lost any claim to me the night they left Maya in that alley. 3 weeks later, they showed up at my apartment. All 3 of them. They looked terrible. My father's face was haggard, his expensive suit rumpled. My mother's makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes. Chloe looked like she'd aged 10 years. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Maya was behind me, peeking around my legs. She'd been playing with her blocks, building a tower that reached almost to her waist. She went very quiet when she saw them, pressing closer to me. "You destroyed this family." My father's voice shook with rage. "Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand how many lives you've ruined?" I stood there, my hand on the doorframe, and looked at them. Really looked at them. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn their love, trying to be good enough, trying to matter to them. And all they'd ever done was make me feel small. "I didn't destroy anything," I said quietly. "I just showed everyone what it really was. Family isn't something you show off at parties. Family is the people who would never abandon a sick 5-year-old child next to a dumpster in the rain." My mother started crying, those performative tears she'd always been so good at. "But we're your family. You're our daughter. How could you humiliate us like this? How could you be so vindictive?" "Vindictive?" The word came out sharp. "You left my daughter outside in the rain because she was crying. She was sick and scared and calling for me, and you put her in an alley with the garbage because she was inconvenient. And you want to talk to me about being vindictive?" "We were going to come back for her," my mother said, her voice breaking. "We just needed a few minutes of quiet. The fundraiser was so important, and she was being so difficult. She's 5 years old. She had a fever of 103. She wasn't being difficult. She was sick and terrified. It was a mistake," my father said, his voice clipped. "We made an error in judgment. But did you have to destroy us publicly? You could have come to us privately. We could have worked this out as a family." I almost laughed. "Come to you privately? The way I came to you privately when I asked for help that night? The way you hung up on me and then ignored my calls for hours while my daughter was sitting in the cold?" Chloe spoke up then, her voice bitter. "Mark's career is over because of you. Our marriage is over. Everything we worked for is gone. And for what? Because you wanted revenge?" "No," I said. "Not revenge. Protection. I needed everyone to see what you really are so that you could never do this to Maya again. So that you could never manipulate me into letting you near her again." "She's our granddaughter," my mother said. "We have rights." "No," I said firmly. "You don't. Not anymore. You gave up any rights when you left her in that alley. You're not grandparents. You're not family. You're just people who share my DNA, and that's not enough." My father's face turned red. "You ungrateful little bitch. After everything we've done for you, we raised you, we gave you everything. You gave me criticism and comparison and conditional love. You gave me the message that I would never be good enough, that I would always be the disappointment. And you know what? I'm done trying to prove myself to you. I'm done caring what you think of me. Elena, please." My mother's tears were flowing freely now. "We made a mistake. Can't you forgive us? Can't we work past this?" I looked at Maya, who was watching this exchange with wide eyes. I thought about the kind of person I wanted her to grow up to be, the kind of boundaries I wanted her to learn to set, the kind of love I wanted her to believe she deserved. "No," I said simply. "We can't. Because you're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry there were consequences. But you're not actually sorry you hurt Maya. If you were, you would have called me that night. You would have brought her back inside. You would have made sure she was okay. But you didn't. You went to your party and turned off your phones and forgot about her entirely. That's not fair, Chloe said. You're twisting everything. Am I? Tell me, Chloe. If it was one of your kids, would you forgive someone who did that to them? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Because we both knew the answer. My mother tried one more time. Please, Elena, we're family. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I looked at her. This woman who'd given birth to me but had never really been a mother. This woman who'd cared more about her Persian rug than her granddaughter's comfort. This woman who'd chosen a party over a child's safety. No, I said. Not anymore. Family isn't just blood. Family is the people who show up for you when things are hard. Family is the people who would never, ever leave a child alone in the dark. You're not my family. You stopped being my family the moment you walked away from my daughter. I looked at Maya then, reaching down to touch her soft hair. My family is right here behind me. My father made a sound of disgust. You're going to regret this. When you need something, when you're strug. I promise you, I will never ask you for anything again. Chloe's expression turned vicious. You'll end up alone. Nobody's going to want anything to do with you after this. You'll be just as much of a pariah as we are. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. I closed the door. I heard them shouting, heard my mother's sobs, heard my father pounding on the door. I turned the deadbolt, and the sound of it clicking into place was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. Maya looked up at me, her eyes wide. Are they gone, Mommy? I picked her up, settled her on my hip, and kissed her forehead. They're gone, sweetheart. They're gone forever. She wrapped her arms around my neck and rested her head on my shoulder. Good, she said softly. I didn't like them very much. Me neither, baby, me neither. The apartment was small and shabby, with its secondhand furniture and peeling paint, but it was ours. And as I carried Maya to the couch, as I turned on her favorite cartoon and pulled a blanket over her, as I watched her finally smile, really smile, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The storm had passed, and on the other side of it, I'd found something I'd lost a long time ago. Myself, my worth, my power. I wasn't their victim anymore. I wasn't the daughter desperately seeking approval. I was Maya's mother. I was a survivor. I was free. 6 months later, I got a promotion at work. I moved us to a better apartment, one with 2 bedrooms and a small balcony where Maya could play. I started therapy, working through decades of emotional abuse and manipulation. I learned what healthy boundaries looked like. I learned that my value didn't depend on anyone's opinion of me. Sometimes Maya asked about her grandparents. I told her the truth, in terms she could understand. Sometimes people aren't very kind, even when they're supposed to love you. And when that happens, it's okay to love them from far away, where they can't hurt you anymore. She seemed to accept that. Children are resilient in ways adults forget to be. I never heard from my parents again. Chloe sent a few bitter emails, blaming me for her divorce, for her fall from grace. I blocked her after the 3rd one. Mark moved to another state, trying to rebuild his career somewhere his name didn't immediately conjure images of a child abandoned in an alley. People sometimes asked if I regretted what I did, if I felt guilty for destroying my family's reputation so publicly, so brutally. I never did. Not for a second. Because the night I found Maya shivering beside that dumpster, I made a promise. I promised her that no one would ever hurt her like that again, that I would always protect her, that she would always, always be enough, exactly as she was. And if keeping that promise meant burning down everything my family had built on lies and pretense, then so be it. Let it burn. We'd build something better from the ashes. My daughter deserved a mother who chose her over everything else. Who stood up for her? Who showed her that love isn't about performance or perfection, it's about being there, especially when things are hard. The reckoning I'd unleashed wasn't just about revenge. It was about truth. It was about refusing to be complicit in cruelty anymore. It was about saying, loudly and clearly, that some things are unforgivable. And as I tucked Maya into bed that night, as I watched her sleep peacefully in her own room for the first time in her life, I knew I'd done the right thing. The world might have seen it as an act of vengeance. But for me, it was an act of love. The fiercest, most protective love I'd ever known. I closed her bedroom door softly and walked to the living room. The apartment was quiet, filled with the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, looking out at the city lights. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something. I wasn't waiting for approval. I wasn't waiting for love. I wasn't waiting to be seen or valued or chosen. I was whole, just as I was, just as we were. The girl who'd spent her life trying to earn scraps of affection from people who didn't know how to love, she was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, a woman who would never again accept less than she deserved. A woman who had learned, finally, that the most important relationship she'd ever have was the one with herself. And that woman was at peace.